Welcome to today's video about cobalt violets, and as you can see, the video this time will be shorter because we have only two pigments. It's the PV14 and the PV49. PV14 also known as cobalt phosphate, and PV49 also known as cobalt ammonium phosphate. I also don't have a lot of tubes or pans, so I am not able to swatch a lot this time because cobalt violets are really expensive, and they are rather on the weak, delicate side, and are also a little bit problematic with reactivation. I tend to use pre-wetting my cobalt violets if I want to use them, because they are really hard to activate, and you have to scrub a lot when you don't pre-wet them. So I have a few examples of the PV14. I have only one version of PV49, and we will also look at two cobalt violet hues for comparison reasons. I will also show a few dot cards I own, so that you can see that that brands also offer a version of cobalt violet, but I didn't have enough from the paint left to swatch it here. The first one is a PV14 from the brand Rembrandt. And you can see it's a very red, violet, very delicate color. The second one is from Winsor Newton Professional, and it looks very similar, but it really granulates a lot, and that's the reason why I don't have this yet, but I really want to own a tube or a pan from that. I really want to work with that color because I love granulation, so it's really interesting for me. We will start with the cobalt violet made with PV14 from Mgram, and I have to say that I really had a lot of problems with that tube because the pigment and the binder really separated a lot, and I had to swirl it in the tube with a toothpick to get a better result. And yeah, that really bothered me because I think I still have more binder than pigment in my swatch, and that's something I really don't like. Yeah, you see that it's a very delicate violet. The hue I think is really beautiful, but yeah, when I ever used up this tube, I probably won't buy a second one for myself. So PV14, sorry, is rated as top 40 pigment on handprint. It's a very light, fast, semi-transparent, non-staining, moderately dark valued, moderately dull violet to red violet, moderate drying shift, and it's one of the most expensive pigments we are using in watercolor or in industrial produced watercolors. And that's the reason why not many brands offer it. A lot of brands only have a cobalt violet hue, and that's the reason, because it's so damn expensive. And also a lot of people don't really like it a lot because they call it gummy and weak and don't enjoy working with it. So the second version here is a lot more darker, a lot darker than the Mgram version. It's the Cobalt Violet Deep from Daniel Smith, and I personally like that color a lot. It has a very special shade and a very special glowing effect when you really get close to the color, which I personally find really beautiful. But it also have this streaky gummy texture. You can see that it doesn't give a really nice flat wash. You can see the streaks, and that's something I personally not like very much. But that is something cobalt violets tend to a lot. And the next we will be swatching is the only one in the lower row. It's Cobalt Violet, also made with PV14 from Blocks. It's a company from Belgium, and it will look very, very weak, but that is only because I scrapped it off from the dot card and didn't have a lot of paint to work with. So I really think it will get a lot deeper when you have a pen or a tube and have a lot of paint to work with. But it's not so easy to prevent something on a dot card without destroying the paper. And it's also not possible to scrub really, really hard on paper. So it looks like the version of Rembrandt and Winsor Newton I showed earlier from the hue. So it's more on the red-violet side. So the next cobalt pigment we are swatching will be the PV49 from Core. And that's the only PV49 I know. There might be some other brands offering it. If you know something or a brand which is offering a PV49 version, please leave me a comment down below. But that's the only one I know about, and that's the only one I have, so I can only swatch this one. But it really looks a lot like the red-violet versions of PV14. It's very, very similar. It granulates, but it also has this streaky texture to it. PV49 is a very light, fast, semi-transparent, non-staining, granulating pigment. It's moderately dark valued, moderately intense red-violet, and is only available from 2 manufacturers worldwide. So yeah, it's probably due to that fact that not many brands offer a color with it because it's not so easily to get, maybe. It's a dull shade of the optimal red subtractive primary. At least that's what I've read in the internet. I personally wouldn't use it as my red primary because it's not it doesn't get very dark. Yeah, it's a more on the weaker side, this color. So the first hue I have is the Cobaltviolet blue from Daniel Smith, and this hue at least uses an unreal cobalt pigment because it's a mixture of PB28 cobalt blue and PB19 quinacridone rose. But you can already see that it is a completely different shade of violet. It has nothing to do with the real cobalt violets. It's much more darker, much more on the bluish side. It is a beautiful color, but I wouldn't buy a tube from it because you can really, really easily mix it yourself if you have a cobalt blue and an PV19 or another magenta color like the Quin Pink PR 122, for example, you can easily swap these two and get a very similar result for that. The only hue I really find worth buying and very, very interesting is the next one we will be swatching, and it's the Cobaltviolet hue from Schminke Horadam. And that's because they're using a very rare pigment, PV62. And I only have seen this pigment used by Schminke and another German company, Lucas. Their artist grade line 1862 also offer a PV62 color, but it's a little bit duller, a little bit weaker than the Schminke version, and it is like the Cobalt Violet Blue from Daniel Smith, a completely different shade of violet. It has nothing to do with a real cobalt violet, but it's really a absolutely beautiful and very, very strongly granulating color, so that you can use it a lot to mix your own super granulation colors and colors which have a color separation effect. And Schminke uses this pigment also in some of their supergranulation colors as well. So that is really something I personally think is absolutely worth buying, even when it's not a real cobalt pigment. I must be honest, I don't use cobalt violets very often. Maybe I should use it more often. I should try to work with them more often. Yeah, I found out Daniel Smith, of course, not only have the Cobalt Violet Deep, but it has also a classic Cobalt Violet, which offers the more reddish shade. Just shown you the dot card from Daniel Smith. From the more darker bluish cobalt violets, I would totally buy the Cobalt Violet Deep rather than the M-gram version. From the reddish shade, I think they are all very similar. I am very interested in the like I said, in the Winsor Newton ones, because on the dot card it seems that it granulates a lot, and that could be really, really interesting for mixing as well. And of course, the violet, cobalt violet hue from Schminke, like I said, is also super interesting, very rare pigment, very granulating, and I think it's really worth buying. So I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something. And yeah, if you like, leave me a comment or a follow or thumbs ups. I would really, really appreciate that. It helps a lot that my channel can grow. And yeah, I will link my other Cobalt family videos in the description box down below. And there will be a few more videos about Cobalt turquoise, cobalt blue, and cobalt cerulean blues coming up next. And when we have finished with all the cobalts, then we will switch to another color family. And if you don't want to miss any of those, then please leave me a follow. And yeah, hopefully you have enjoyed this video, and I wish you a wonderful week. Thank you very much for watching.